Hello everyone, my name is Chavika. I used to debate for Royal College. I now coach Elizabeth Moir. I'm going to be doing a debrief on round 2 of the Chapman's tournament. The motion is this house supports the removal of gendered categories in entertainment award shows. I'll first talk about prop, then about op, and then finally on potential clashes that may happen in this debate. First, on proposition's setup. I think it is straightforward that proposition is advocating for an open category with no gender-based restrictions. I think they can point out in setup that award shows tend to have a lot of influence on society, and they spread a lot of perceptions and stereotypes. And I don't think this is going to be contested by opposition, so you don't need to spend too much time there. It's just necessary groundwork for your arguments. I do think it is important for proposition to characterize the entertainment industry as one that is now a lot more progressive and inclusive of women, just to prove that there's a great chance that they're still going to win even in an open category. I think if you're going to make arguments about the celebrities or the people within the entertainment industry themselves as opposed to people in general in society, I think then you would want to frame the debate as inclusive of smaller scale award shows. So not just the Oscars and the Emmys, but also smaller regional and community based award shows, because that makes any arguments about the people within those award shows a little bit more sympathetic. Um, let's talk about proposition's potential arguments. I think they will probably want to run an argument about the perception of women and their empowerment, because unlike in sports, there does not seem to be a biological reasoning as to why there's a separate category for men and women. And having those like categories implies a perception that women are somehow inferior at entertainment based jobs. So when they have an open category, they can compete against one another, and therefore any win that a woman is likely to get is going to be more of an accomplishment because it beats all the contenders. Whereas comparatively in opposition, it people think that women only win those awards simply because they have a category for themselves. I think prop can prove that they're likely to win even in an open category, because that the industry is becoming more progressive, because acting talent isn't like biologically based on gender, and also if no women get wins or nominations, there's going to be backlash towards the award shows and they lose profits, so they have an incentive to make sure that that doesn't happen. But I can also point out that even a couple of wins is a huge deal of progress because of the ripple effect it creates in society, that it goes all across the news and social media when a particular woman wins. However, I think it is useful for proposition to lower the burden for themselves, to say that winning isn't essential. Just the inclusion of nominations and also just the perception and optics of the category changing to say that it is an equal playing field where men and women can compete in each other is a good in and of itself the proposition needs to assert. So the impacts of this argument is quite clear. It's that women get more opportunity and the overall perception of women is bettered, and they get more empowerment. Proposition can also run an argument about the inclusion of non-binary individuals, because currently with gender-based categories they have a difficult choice of either not accepting their nominations or being forced into a category that they do not identify themselves with. So an example of this I think is Liv Hewson, who is non-binary, decided not to accept the nomination because there was not a category for them. So this discourages people from that community from entering into award shows because they think the award shows have no place for them. And then the impact of this argument is that when you have an open category that allows for people of different gender-based identities, it creates more opportunity for these individuals in the industry. It sets a precedence for the acceptance of these individuals, even in like the broader scale of society. Let's talk about opposition then. So opposition setup would probably be a characterization of the entertainment industry where men, or particularly white women, dominate the award shows. I think an example that they can use from this is the Brit Awards in 2022, which was gender neutral and an open category. However, like no women were nominated at all, which shows that these white men have a lot of dominance within these award shows. I think opposition can potentially support a separate category for non-binary individuals because it is a gendered category, and that would help them maybe in countering some of proposition's arguments about non-binary individuals. However, if opposition chooses to run this, they have to say why this is likely to appear in these award shows and why it's likely to succeed in giving non-binary people the representation and empowerment as opposed to proposition's open category. For arguments for opposition, they'll probably have an argument on how it creates more opportunity for women because there is currently a lot of barriers to entry for women. They can talk about the barriers to entry in general for women in entering the workforce. Stuff like there's less encouragement for women from their households to enter the workforce, more pressure on them to stay at home and take care of families, less money spent on their education, and then talk about the more industry exclusive barriers to entry. The fact that there are less women in the industry and therefore it's not many comfortable spaces and they do face a lot of abuse and discrimination. They often get casted into sexualized roles that they may not necessarily want to do. That the fact that men often get more characters and more engaging characters as options because a lot of these stories are targeted at male audiences and the writers are often male, and also the fact that when it's based on like historical events, they often feature more men simply because they had greater positions within history. You can also talk about the fact that this is a numbers game, so that because there are less women within the industry, the chances of a woman rising to the top despite being equally talented is simply less in probability because there are much more women. So parallel for this is actually chess, because chess is like purely a mental sport that doesn't there is no like biologically inherent advantage to men. However, there are exclusively titles and tournaments for women because of all these barriers to entry, because it's simply a numbers game and they want more women to have a chance at winning at the top. I think opposition can point out that even if they enter the industry throughout all these barriers and they still get nominated, they're very less likely to win because the voters tend to be older white men because of within these academies because of privilege, and they tend to favor men when it comes to voting. Also, you can talk about because of the sexism in the industry, a lot more engaging roles are given to men, and those roles are the type of roles that are likely going to get nominations or win in awards. So I think proof for the fact that there's a lot of barriers to entry for women is like the directors award in the Oscars, which I think is like genderless, but women very rarely get nominated for that. I think only like two women have won that award in like the entire history of the award show. Comparatively, opposition is guaranteed women being nominated and winning in categories that are gender based. So you can talk about the good impacts of that. I think you can also talk about that there are changes within the industry that makes it worse for women when you have an open category, because when you have that open category, they're likely to write less main roles or less engaging roles for women, because earlier that they will have a chance to win in the women's category, now writers and producers will think that they might as well write more men's roles, because winning in the open category because of those barriers to entry and there's sexism is going to be quite unlikely for women. So the incentives of those people who create these shows also changes to worsen the opportunities for women. You can also talk about the impacts of this argument in terms of there being less opportunities for the celebrities within the industry, and also the great impacts to society in terms of when they lose, and they're likely to lose despite it being reasons outside of their control. It'll be rhetorically used as reinforcement of male superiority in the industry, and that when less women win, there's going to be less role models and less empowerment for women in general within society. Opposition can also potentially run an argument about non-binary individuals. They can say that the removal of gendered categories may be justified by saying that it is for the inclusion of non-binary individuals, and that assumption is somewhat fair because a lot of non-binary individuals do tend to call for gender neutral award shows, right? So then the existing movement of like popular figures and certain politically aligned groups that are against the inclusion of non-binary individuals can use this as ammunition to say that, oh, we are defending women's rights and there are safe spaces within the entertainment industry, these non-binary individuals are trying to take that away from us, and therefore they get more ammunition to spew and incite discrimination and hatred towards these marginalized individuals. So there's an argument there maybe to be considered as well. About the clashes in this debate, I think there's probably going to be a big clash about women's empowerment. Strategically, proposition may want to focus more on the optics of the category, changing to reflect the equal abilities of men and women in an open category and the creation of discourse through the change in and of itself, while opposition will probably want to focus more on the guaranteed female wins that they get on their side and how that's better than propositions potentially fewer number of women rising to the top in a open category where all of these barriers to entry and sexism does exist. So opposition can maybe talk about how they want more famous women in terms of numbers, because those famous women that win awards and get nominated do a lot of activism for other women and they create role models in greater numbers. However, proposition can still argue that women are going to be successful even in an open category, probably by pushing the characterization of the status quo being more progressive and inclusive of women, while opposition will talk more about the barriers to entry and talk about how the industry is still extremely discriminatory towards women, and maybe point out that even in the best case of proposition, it is at best white straight women that are likely to have inclusion and be celebrated, whereas people of color and other women of like minority types are likely still not going to get a level of recognition. I think it is helpful, even when there are conflicting characterizations and contexts, that the teams cross over into each other's characterization and say why even then their arguments work. So for proposition, even if the industry is really, really sexist, that still means that a single win in an open category would generate a massive challenge to the patriarchy, because it establishes that women can beat men for like a best actor award even when they're competing against every single potential competitor. In opposition, they can say that even if the industry is really progressive as proposition claims, the women still have structural barriers within society to enter the workforce, and fewer women will enter the industry, and men will still have the numbers advantage to dominate the open category. And once they do dominate the open category and women don't win or get nominated, that undoes any progress on the perception of women in the industry. I also think this clash will include both women within the industry, that means people who are working in these jobs, as well as broad effects of women in society. If a particular team wants to focus more on the individuals in the industry, they may want to maybe downplay the viewership of the award shows to show that it is like on a historical like low in terms of viewers, while a team that wants to talk more about the impacts to the rest of society wants to say that no, it is still being watched, and even if the viewership is going down, there's still going to be a lot of media, external media being generated through news and social media when whoever wins. Yeah. Okay, then there's probably going to be a clash about the inclusion of non-binary individuals. Prop will talk about how they have an obvious benefit of how non-binary individuals don't get forced into binary categories when they have an open category. While if opposition chooses to support a separate category for non-binary individuals, Prop would contest this by saying that that particular category wouldn't have as much interest and competition. It would have the same problems as a women's only category of things like confirmation bias, and there is still a greater potential for recognition for non-binary individuals in open category when they can beat all of the competition. So OP would still have to defend that separate category for non-binary individuals by talking about the limited exposure they would get in an open category. If opposition chooses not to run a separate category for non-binary individuals, they would have to accept the trade-off of non-binary individuals having to choose a male or female category to compete in, but they can minimize the impact of proposition's arguments by saying that non-binary people are a minority in terms of numbers, that in the entertainment industry there aren't really that many that are going to be affected by it, while proposition will argue that no, that means it's very vulnerable stakeholders and more of them are going to be coming up in the future as the greater trends of society moves towards more modern and progressive view. So those are the potential arguments, setup and clashes for this motion. Thank you for listening.